Good evening. My name is Hugh McFadden. I'm not going to say I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. I'm only 37 years old, but doing water law does this to a guy. I worked for Judge Loeb at the Water Court. I've been there 7 years. Before that, I was head of the water section of the Wyoming Attorney General's office.
We cannot hear you, sir.
Well, can you come up? There's 3 or 4 seats up front. You want the microphone?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Does that work? Are we on?
Buzzing, but there's no.
Are we on? We're not getting anything.
No.
Switch on the mic.
There.
What does it take to get this to work without feedback?
You could probably turn it down just a little bit more because it's working real well right now.
I can't tell from here what's going on.
I know, that's the reason I'm.
Thank you. Can you hear in the back now? You can't hear. You want to turn this sideways? Or shall I just shout?
We can hear you back here.
Okay. Okay, I'm McFadden. I'm from the Water Court. I've said that. I'm here because Judge Dayton signed an order appointing a water commissioner for Flint Creek this year. And a lot of folks don't know what's going on, and I think you need to know. It's your valley, and my role in this is strictly to advise the court and to talk with you about the administration of water and water court decrees. And my advice to the court is always completely neutral. I take no stand whether you should or shouldn't sign an order, have a commissioner, any of that stuff. But since the district judges don't often do a lot of water, they rely on us around the state. We now have 43 enforcement projects in the state, and many of them are going quite well. Thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. There was a sign-up sheet. If we have your address and you want info, we can send it to you. If you put an email on there, we can sometimes scan the documents and you can have them right away. You've had a commissioner here before on the lower part of the creek under the old Featherman decree. I understand that there is a federal decree on the top part of the creek. When we have a water court decree, even a temporary preliminary decree, it incorporates all of those other decrees, and the rights that are in them should be in the water court decree. The problem with the older decrees is they leave out a lot of water rights, because a lot of the decreed rights are just the ones that were brought into the court in 1906 or whatever. That leaves out a lot of use rights, leaves out a lot of subsequent filed rights. It may not even have everybody who was on the creek at the time that the decree was in, and it may be inaccurate. So when the judge did that, signed the order, I contacted the DNRC and asked them to put together a tabulation. The head of the Adjudication Bureau is John Peterson, and he is here tonight. John, will you wave your hand or something? And with him is Caitlin McLean, who's over here, and Caitlin has brought a map, or a set of maps, and she's the one who will put together the tabulation and the indexes. And when this is all done, you will have an index that shows the priority dates, and you'll have one that shows the owners and
the commissioners did
and the commissioner's index. And the commissioner's index shows everything in priority order and so on, and it has a space for comments. And the reason it does this is that we know that all the decrees are defective. And I think Caitlin will tell you, when she's been putting this material together, she finds things like the diversions are in the wrong quarter section. And nobody's fault, it's just they got claimed that way. And this happens all over the state. So part of what we do the first 2-3 years of this is a shakedown. We try to find where the errors are and get them fixed. And I'll talk to you later about how that happens. But I thought, first of all, I should tell you just a tiny bit about water law. There are 3 things that a good water law will do. One is it will provide security, which means it will identify and protect the rights. Second, it will provide reliability, because it will provide a system where the state can enforce and administer the rights over time. And the third thing is it will provide flexibility. It allows water rights to be changed, transferred, and sold. Montana is behind the 8 ball on this, frankly. In 1903, the legislature first considered adopting the Wyoming system and didn't do it. And it did it maybe a dozen times since then. We are at a disadvantage to the states downstream of us. Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, all of them have a system where if I buy a ranch for a client, I can go to the water commissioner and say, how much water has this place had for the last 50 years? And they can tell me to the drop, which is really nice if you're buying a ranch or if you're selling one. Do that in Montana and you got to guess. And this is serious business for the real estate agents who tell me they lose sales to those other states all the time. It's serious for you if you're thinking about subdividing. It's serious for you if you're thinking about irrigating, because you aren't sure what your neighbors have. You know what you've had and what you've accommodated, but it may not be what's on the paper. And it's serious for the state because there are envious downstream eyes looking at both sides of the state. I like to look at this stuff in my spare time, and I thought of a way to take water out of the Yellowstone and get it into the Green River, and Las Vegas can just watch it come on down. Surprised me the other day, I looked at a publication from 1967 from the Los Angeles County Society of American Civil Engineering Society, and the project that I designed was in it and on the drawing board, along with 7 or 8 others, to take water from up here and go south. One of the best things we can do to protect our state's water is to have this adjudication and get it finished. And the water court, as Judge Lobel likes to say, is going to pack its bags and walk away in 10 or 15 years. Our job will be done, but the administration won't. And at that point, we should have a system that can be administered like the other western states, and some security and some predictability and reliability in our water system. Okay, you all know water belongs to the state. We have the right to use it, and once we're done with it, it belongs to the state again when it's in the creek, and it's up for somebody else to appropriate it. In '73, the legislature passed the Water Use Act, and in '82, most of you or your parents or your grandparents filed claims, and those claims established the prima facie water right for the place. In 1984, Judge Leslie signed a decree for the Flint Creek drainage. That's the decree, the temporary preliminary decree that we'll be operating under. All the temporary preliminary means in these 2 decree basins is that there were undetermined federal or federal Indian reserved water rights out there, and the Compact Commission wasn't around, so it hadn't worked on those yet. So with that undetermined, the decree had to be temporary in order to get the federal government to participate in it. That's all that word temporary means. The judge has signed an order and asked DNRC to re-examine all of these 2 decree basins, including Flint Creek, which means we will get a full examination of it next time, and we hope it will be better than the one that was done in '84. Well, we're sure of it. We have many more people, and they're much more highly trained and skilled than they were then. I neglected to introduce Jim Nave, who's from the Missoula office of DNRC. He does new appropriations, but the people who work for him also do hydrology and water measurement and enforcement. So we have the full suite of people, a support cast here tonight. water commissioner works for the district court. He is subject to the orders of the court. One thing you're going to want to know is what happens if the water commissioner doesn't do it the way it should be done. And first thing you do is talk to him about it and ask where he's coming from. The second thing, if he is totally out of line, you can take him, petition the court for a hearing, and the judge will decide whether he's doing it right or not. And if he's not doing it right, the water commissioner can be punished for contempt of court. Which brings me to the other side of the same thing. There are things that happen, bad things, to water users who decide they don't want to play along either. For people who either, water in Wyoming, stealing it, you get style points. You don't get that here, you get in trouble. If you take water that belongs to a senior appropriator, or you take water without an appropriation here, you can be subject to a civil penalty of $1,000 a day. That's serious business. Or, and it has happened, if you say, water commissioner, you're not coming on here, you're not going to regulate my head gate. Not a particularly good idea, because you can be subject to a criminal penalty for that, for interference with a public officer. And there was a gentleman who tried this over before Judge Tucker was appointed in Madison County, parked his pickup truck on the road and said, you aren't going in there. And the commissioner came back the next day with the sheriff, and the truck was there, and said, please move it. He said, don't care to. So they took him in, and they had a criminal trial, had a jury trial. He was found guilty. He was fined $100. He was given 6 months in jail, suspended, and since he didn't have the money to pay a lawyer, he had to pay the public defender's fee, which was $3,000. Why he chose to go that way, I don't know, because he was homeless, he was broke, and 2 years later the court records show he'd only paid down $150 of this $3,100 that he owed. But the judges are quite serious about their orders, and they don't like to have folks thumb their nose at them. So please go along with them, and I'm sorry to have to bear the bad news, but that's the way it is. I'm here to tell you what I see the law as. Check with your own lawyers about anything I say. Please, I'm not here to give you legal advice. I'm here for being with the water court, so check with your lawyer. If you think I'm blowing smoke, ask them. Have them call me. I'll talk to them about it. My only interest is in getting the word out to you so that you are not as disturbed as you were a week ago. The court did this over on the Mussel Shell about 10 years ago, and Judge Lobel and my predecessor, Colleen Coyle, spent several months going over there getting folks used to the idea. 10 years later, I think most folks over there are fairly happy with it. It analogizes pretty well to Flint Creek, because the Dead Man's Basin water is a DNRC project, and it comes in, and I don't know whether they paint it pink or what they do, but they keep those two kinds of water separated, and they do a good job of it. And I'm predicting the same thing can happen over here. I know also in some of these basins where we have decrees being enforced that folks don't always stick to the letter of the law. They don't take their entire 22nd feet when they could be using it. If they can only use 10, they leave 10 in the river for somebody downstream. They don't take it just because they're entitled to it. And it's the kind of accommodation I suspect has been going on in this valley too, because it's just how folks in the West operate. And I'm not going to discourage that at all, because it makes it work for everybody. There are going to be return flow patterns that are may be a little bit different. You know how all this works. You put the water on in the spring, and this is what makes your stream stay alive in August, is somebody upstream of you doing flood irrigation, because 45% goes into evapotranspiration, the rest of it goes into the ground or runs off. And the stuff that goes into the ground is leaking into the stream and keeping it alive for the folks below you for the rest of the season. Where we don't see this is when somebody puts in a sprinkler. This happened down around Sheridan, Wyoming. On the Tongue River and its tributaries like Goose Creek, Big Goose Creek, people started putting in sprinklers 15, 20 years ago. There are no return flows in the Tongue now. And this is why Montana is suing Wyoming, in my opinion, is because the Wyoming folks aren't producing return flows. It's not that they're stealing the water's going by, but it's going by in June instead of August. And it's a sad situation, but if somebody here puts in a sprinkler, you can expect to see changes in your return flows. And you can't make them wastewater, you can't stop them. But look for that. And I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Well, as soon as we have a commissioner, I ask DNRC to identify all the points of diversion, map them, and get me these indexes, and then I give them to the water commissioner. And the person who's doing that is Caitlin. Would you care to say a little bit about what you're doing and explain your maps?
Sure.
And I neglected to say this is supposed to be really informal, and if you have questions, interrupt me at any time.
Thanks, you. Hi, as Hugh said, my name is Caitlin McLean. I work in the DNRC adjudication office in Helena. In the last couple of weeks, I've been working on pulling together all the information that the commissioner will need in order to perform his duties. So, as Hugh said, this is the 43rd enforcement project in the state. Right now, we're just looking at the main stem of Flint Creek, and I found approximately 300 separate points of diversion on the main stem. And so my process while going through this to create this information for the commissioner, I look at each and every one of those water rights at face value to see where your head gate or where your pump is. And I look at aerial photos and try to match those up. As Hugh said, that there are errors in these decrees. So if I notice any of these errors, I make comments every time I find one. Frequently this is a land description error. Those are the most frequent things I notice. And I do my best to fill in the blanks. Sometimes I really can't. It comes down to a judgment call, and I'll make those comments for the commissioner. And it's important that we get feedback from all of you about any of these things that if I put together, if it's incorrect, that we get information back from you so we can improve this product. Also, Hugh mentioned changes. Let's say you switched out your head gate a few years ago and put in a pump, and if you didn't notify DNRC, I'm not going to know to look for a pump. So if that's the situation, you may need to file a change authorization. That's something you'd want to talk to Jim Nave over here in your regional office. He can help you with that. So the last couple of weeks I've been matching up those points of diversion as best as possible. And so I've created these maps. We've got a couple around the room that you can look at. And so I've marked each and every one of these points and assigned a ditch name. Now, when I was going through your claims, I noticed that there wasn't a whole lot of consistency on ditch names. So the name that you see on the map may not be what you call your ditch. Some people call it the North Ditch, other people call it the Big Ditch. When in doubt, I tried to match it up to the Water Resource Survey that was published back in 1959, I believe, for Granite County. They have maps pulled together. They have a lot of the ditch information, so I use that as a fallback just for consistency. But again, more information we can get from you all about any errors you might find, the better this will become. One of the handouts that Hugh put on the table over there for you lists how I make my map. You'll notice if you take a look at these maps, there's a numbering system for each one of these points. So the most common one is a head gate. These will just have a number followed by the ditch name. If you've got a pump, we'll put a P at the end. If, let's say we have livestock direct claims on the source, those will be start with an LS for livestock. And all of this is covered in that pamphlet, so you don't have to remember all this right now. And you know, if you get questions on it, feel free to talk to us. Now, as I go through these maps, I'm also compiling all of this information, all of these comments that I have into these indexes that Hugh mentioned. And so we have 3 indexes that we create. One is the owner index that lists all the water rights by owner. The second is the priority date, so it'll list it by your priority date, which is your date of first use. And the third is the commissioner's index, and that one shows all the comments and everything else that's the most useful for the commissioner, I would imagine. Let's see. So you'll notice on these tables we have large maps that show the entire extent of Flint Creek. Feel free to take a look. In the binders, we also have zoom-ins on these PODs, points of diversion, which is where you're withdrawing the water from the source. That'd be your head gate, your pump, whatever it is you're using. So you can get a little more detail on some of those areas. The indexes, the tabulation isn't finished yet. We do have the first few pages of each one so that you can get an idea of what they look like, how they could be useful, the information we provide. And so we've got those around the room. Feel free to look at them, ask questions. In a nutshell, that's what I do. So Hugh, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or?
Caitlin?
Uh-huh.
You talked about these maps. Are you going to leave maps in Granite County so that they'd be in a, say at the courthouse or someplace where they would be accessible? So after tonight we would be able to look over them, because it's pretty hard this evening probably for us all to do it. Or and if they are accessible by on the internet, that would be, and I don't know if they are or not, that would be good if we had an email or an address where we could get those.
Yeah, actually, John, do we have a procedure on that right now, or is that?
As far as
we keep these maps in the DNRC offices. Also,
we provide them to the water commissioners, and also the district court will have copies of those as well.
Oh, so Brian then would have these.
Yeah,
maps.
when they're complete, I have a couple of additions too. When they're complete, the water commission will have all those, and they'll be at the district court. And we can provide you JPEG copies of your individual ones if you provide us an email or give us a call. And also, I'd like to just elaborate a little bit. On these larger maps, we know there's an interplay with the East Fork of Rock Creek going on with the Flint Creek project. Caitlin just mapped the known places where large, measurable amounts of water flow into Flint Creek and out of Flint Creek. There's different commissioners for the East Fork and Flint Creek. And also this year, because of the time involved, it's just the main stem. But in coming years, it's going to be all the tributaries to Flint Creek except for Lower Willow Creek. And we'll have that put together as soon as possible. So right now the maps only identify the water rights on the main stem of Flint Creek, but it's going to be all tributaries as we move forward on that. Yes?
When you speak of district court, which district court are you speaking of?
Judge
Your
Dayton,
Judge Dayton.
right here,
Okay,
right here in
here.
Granite County.
Yep,
Okay.
your local district court.
Okay.
Yeah, because you know what you as the water users will be funding the water commissioner and its local control. We're just compiling the information under the new decree for all water users to be in the indexes. So under the old historic decrees, it only had the older water rights and have the changes and the permits and,
Right.
and that type of things. And when we're done with this, all the water rights that we know of will be included in those indexes
So when you use the term water court, you're speaking
of the decree.
of the decree?
The new decree, the new water court decree, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, versus the old district court decrees
Okay,
and the
but
federal
then-
decree.
And then district court refers to Phillipsburg Courthouse?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And the maps would be kept in the clerk of court's office?
Okay.
No, I don't know, it's a
Where
question.
does Judge Dayton indicate?
I don't know where the judge will keep them. I would commit to putting them in the public library if the library will take them, because I want them accessible to everybody. Would that help you?
Sir, I'm on the Phillipsburg Library Board, and our problem right now is space. If well, we're really crammed for space.
I've been on the library board, I know what you're talking about.
And I really can't envision any place where people could actually fold them out and look at them. Could we roll them up
Yes,
and,
you can roll them up and store them.
okay, then we should be able to.
And
Well, you know,
When
wouldn't
you
the
get-
district court be a better place, because they're open,
Right.
they're open there, and they can spread them out in the tables in the
I'll
courtroom.
put them wherever you all want them. These are public documents. Everything I do, except when I'm making a decision, is public.
Yeah.
So
I would
you're
have to
done.
agree with my neighbor, Charles Johnson there, that if the information is administered by the district court, it ought to be at the district court's office.
I was offering to put both places. I wasn't gonna keep it out of the court because I can't, I wouldn't. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, sir, Phillipsburg Library, we're one of the smallest in the state, and by state law, we're only allowed to be open 13 hours a week.
Well, we'll put them in the courthouse and not worry about it. If you want them,
That
call
would
me.
be, okay, that would be fine. I mean, because everybody will want to see
Yeah.
them. I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're willing to take a set and make them available, but whoever spoke out about the time frame is correct.
All right. When you get the tabulation book, it will look sort of like this, only it'll be like that. It's not a huge thing at all, and it is indexed so you can find things really easily. It's made for the commissioner to use in the field. It's made for him to take notes in. Are you, you can stay. And it's really important to get your corrections. And there are a couple, three ways that you can make the corrections. One is you can just, for something simple like a clerical error, just make a motion to amend your water right, send it to me, and we'll check it out. If we have questions on where your head gates are, and three people have put in 3 different 10-acre subdivisions, I would like to package this all up and have Jim's hydrologist come out one time with a GPS and a flow meter or a staff gauge or whatever and check things, but we want those accurate, and so do you. So we can have them measured with the GPS. I did this over on Rock Creek coming out of the Crazies. Took a couple of days, and they did 15 or 20 of them. Now those are right. We want yours right too. If that doesn't satisfy everything, and there are errors that need serious correction, you can go to the district court and you can ask Judge Dayton to certify the matter over to the water court in Bozeman. And the water judge, the chief water judge over there, will put somebody in charge of it, possibly me, and they will look at all this and give an answer back to Judge Dayton on the certification as to who owns what and where it is. We know there's another source of errors, and it's one of the worst kept secrets in the state, and that is that in 1982, Judge Leslie and others went around and said, claim lots, we'll straighten it out later. Well, I'm sorry, I'm here and it's later. And this is really unpleasant for me. I've seen people claim 50 acre feet to irrigate 4 acres. That's more than they use in the Imperial Valley of California, where they grow stuff 12 months a year. But there are claims like that in Montana, and they're nonsense. And if the U.S. Supreme Court were looking at interstate litigation, it would toss those out. And we don't want that in our records, because it just makes everything we do in the state suspect. So we got to get them accurate. We're not here to take anybody's water away. We're here to find out what you were using in 1973 and after that by permit. And make sure you keep that. Is there a way I've missed on getting corrections? You can call me and I'll help you at the time too. Yeah.
I have one question. When we started filing our water rights in, well, the early 80s and so forth, there were very few sprinklers. Almost everybody has center pivots now. And as you noted, there's no return flow.
Yeah.
Are we,
We're stuck.
is the return flow enough to actually satisfy people's claims?
There may not be, and that's just a function of using sprinklers. You take out less and the rest stays in the river at that point. And you calibrate them so you're not throwing pump energy into putting water on that's going to run off. And it's just the way it is. Agriculture has changed.
Yes, it does.
And you probably get more tonnage that way too. Yes?
Can we just talk about terms just a little bit?
Sure.
You're talking about making an enforceable decree for based on the Flint Creek this year.
Yes.
Is that, what's that called? Is that a temporary,
It is still the temporary preliminary decree.
still temporary preliminary?
Yeah.
I also have a right on Lower Willow Creek, which was taking the next step. It's a temporary decree, correct?
I don't know,
Okay.
honestly.
And you accepted that as a tributary from Flint Creek?
I will do whatever Judge Dayton decides should be done.
No, that's what, you mentioned that
Yeah.
you would, all the tributaries of Flint Creek except Lower Willow Creek.
Well, it comes in pretty low, and it's operating under its own decree right now, and that's an apple cart maybe we don't want to upset right now.
Well, I agree completely, but at
Well,
what
it seemed
point?
okay to upset this other apple cart.
Well, gotta get my apples somewhere.
But, so, at some point, do they become one decree? They're in the same basin.
When enough of you decide to petition Judge Dayton to manage them as a single
I
decree.
see.
Yeah,
That's the way the water court's gonna deal with it for the
Well-
time being anyhow.
that's the way the law would deal with it. I mean, it's up to you all how your basin gets managed, and if you don't like what's going on, the one thing you probably can't do is go back to the old decrees, but you can have a
And I
decree
think
on
you
the
said
segment.
that, sir.
Sir?
You told me on the phone that we had the option of either or. We could either accept or administrate under the old decrees, Featherman or federal decree, or the judge had the option of administrating temporary, which turns out to be is going to be permanent decree.
Okay, maybe I misspoke.
So,
I think the judge has the authority to do what he wants.
but you said he could do either or. And he chose the or, the temporary, which turns out is going to be permanent decree, over the old two.
Well, I don't know in what sense you're saying it's gonna be permanent. Right now, it's the temporary preliminary decree until the water court acts again. That's the Montana State Water Court decree.
But the water court's been waiting to act for almost 30 years.
And every year they say it'll be another 5. I know this. And the legislature did not really fund things until after the turn of the century. They had like 2 people in DNRC doing examination of 219,000 claims, and they had like 3 water masters. Now we have 11. And I don't know, there were, 38 people doing decree examination a year ago? And the legislature has put milestones and benchmarks on all of us. And they've had audit teams come over and check us out and tell us how we're doing it wrong and how we can make it faster. Somebody is determined to get this thing over with.
Right, wrong, or indifferent.
I won't say wrong. One thing we like to do is hope we get it right. We like to try to get it right the first time, because it's a waste of time to come back and do it again. Yes?
Sir, if I may ask, how is a decree that's not finalized enforceable?
Because that's what the statute says. It says you can enforce a temporary decree, a temporary preliminary decree, or a final decree.
So 100 years of precedent is just out the door with one stroke of a pen?
That's what the legislature did. It's what it has
How come
said.
nobody was informed of that?
I wasn't here at the time.
No public knowledge.
Yeah.
But if your legislature did, that's where you should ask, why was this done? It was done in, when, 1972, in the back? Yes, sir.
Does this water court or the DNRC have the authority to set aside a decree handed down by a higher court?
The only higher court for the water court is the Montana Supreme Court.
What about a federal court?
That is not a higher court. It is a coordinate, independent branch of government. And one thing we have done for the last 150 years in the West is try to keep the federal government out of water administration. That's been a uniform policy across the West. Their decree does not trump a water court decree. And if you want to take it up to the state Supreme Court, please do. There's a question up front. Go ahead.
We go back to, if there's errors, which we all know, there's errors in all of them, I mean, it's complicated. And is it up to the individual users to correct those errors, and how long do they have to do that?
It is partly up to the individual users, and it's in your interest to have them corrected, but the water commissioner is chiefly where we'll go, because he will be making notes. So tell him, and at the end of the season, I'll get a report. And it will say, here's what I saw, this head gate is in the wrong section.
So what will encourage the water court to continue to the next step then? What's the next step? Is
The
a
next
final
step
decree?
is to send me a written something that says this needs to be fixed, if you want it fixed.
No, I mean, the overall, I mean, we're in this process now, and
The next step
what's the
is.
next step?
Okay, the next step is to get what Caitlin completes and take it to the judge and have him look it over and say this is now the tab book for this drainage.
So, but that's not a final decree, correct?
No, the final decree is mythical. It's gonna happen someday. It's not it's not on our radar, okay? I admit that. But the preliminary decree is on the horizon. It's not close, it's not scheduled, but it's on the horizon. We got 85 of these things to do. Most of them are under decree now.
Okay, let's go back to what you said earlier about the water commissioner's role in codifying all the water rights and all the head gates and all the appropriate filings.
Yes.
Do you have any type of an form or an instruction book for the water commissioner to follow so we know that he's done the job properly? Or is it just at the end of the year, I'll file my report and you guys can bitch about it all winter type situation?
I have a water commissioner training manual. They are sent for training, and I don't